I was aiming for British Touring Car Championship. That was where I would have loved to have gone.
What if you grew up in an environment where your father was a car enthusiast or a racing enthusiast? Surely it's going to rub off on you, isn't it? Well, today for this Passion for Cars episode, we're in the West Midlands and we're going to go inside this business unit here. It's the irony of it all, isn't it? Where you started as a small child, watching Dad going around a racetrack, to actually now be driving with him in this car. We are meeting my racing driver guests, Claire Norman and her father, Charles Tippet, at Laranca Engineering's historic motorsport race preparation workshop in the West Midlands. They have built and look after Claire and Charles's race car, a BMW 2002 Ti. Claire and Charles are ordinary people, just like you and me, but they have an incredibly inspiring story both on and off the track, and we learn how Claire has followed in her father's footsteps and has become quite an accomplished racing driver in her own right. Did you ever drive anything like go-karts or anything when you were young?
No, we had a pedal car. Not quite the same.
Close enough.
Yeah.
So Charles, I think we'll start with you first of all, if that's okay, because I think this all started when you were quite young.
I was very lucky. I lived in a school because my father was a headmaster, and in the summer holidays I was allowed to drive a very old Land Rover on the playing fields. I was age 12 when I first learned to drive a car. By the time I came to be 17 and allowed to drive legally, I'd been driving for 5 years in all sorts of cars, including an MGB and a Lotus 7, always on grass. So I was very fortunate.
That's an amazing start, really, isn't it? And I suppose that, in some ways, defined you as a person where you are right now, because that opportunity presented itself, I suppose, didn't it?
Yes, and I've always been sporty and competitive, playing a lot of hockey. You don't expect an accountant to be a racing driver.
No.
And the day after getting my qualification, I bought my first racing car. A month later, I started my first race at Silverstone.
Wow.
And I was then 23. Raced for that year.
What was it like trying to get sponsorship back then?
It's extremely hard. There is an element of luck sometimes, of meeting the right people who happen to have an interest in motorsport, who think it might be good for their business.
But I suppose ultimately it's results, isn't it? If you can perform on track, then they're more likely to come with you, is that?
It's results and also exposure for the company. So you then have to work very hard looking after their needs as well as your own racing needs. And organising events for them, for their customers, things like this. In October 1975, when something went wrong with the car and I ended up hitting a bank head-on at about 100.
Oh my word.
Which is not recommended. I was lifted out of the car. I thought, this is October, I'll be back racing in March. It was 5 years before I was back racing. And I started when Ford Motor Company first brought out the Ford Fiesta, and they started with a series just for Ford Fiestas. You went down to the Ford factory with a trailer. There was a body shell and various boxes, and they said, I think all the bits are there. And then you had to go away and put it together. And then I raced in 2 years Renault 5 Turbo and 2 years Saab Turbo, where all the cars were the same. And it made for exceedingly close racing.
How did you do in those racing series?
With Fiesta, apart from the first year, the next 3 years, I was always in the top 3. Renault, I won the first race, much to my surprise and everybody else's. And then with Saab, I got approached by Saab, a Saab dealer, to drive a car which at that stage didn't exist.
Right.
And they took one of their demonstrators out of the dealership and we had 6 weeks in which to turn it into a race car. In the first year, we ended up coming second in the championship, and then we prepared it entirely ourselves within the dealership the next year, and we won the series up against quite a few professional drivers like Tiffany Dell, Barry Williams, Jerry Marshall, people who are known professionals. So 1987 or 88 was my final year.
Okay.
And I stopped racing, didn't race for 20 years, didn't go to a circuit for 20 years.
So what happened during that period? Was it career or having family or?
I returned to hockey.
Okay.
And I tried to take up sailing. Claire came along in the second year of the 80s that I was racing, and my wife Jean came along to every race for 8 years. She only missed 3, one relating to each berth. She was allowed time out for one. Very supportive, and we raced in this country, UK. We went across to Germany. We raced at the Nürburgring. We raced at Zolder. We raced at Zandvoort in Holland. Indeed, I won there.
Right.
3 of us crossed the line side by side.
Wonderful.
And 2 of us did not know who the winner was.
Oh, photo finish type thing.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Except they didn't have cameras geared up, so it was somebody saying, that car won.
Yeah, I like the look of that car, it wins.
Yeah.
So, and we raced at Zolder then as well, places like that. And Claire would be brought along in a buggy. My mum used to come along and look after her so that we could race. So from a very young age, she was dragged out to race circuits for quite a few years.
Yeah, I always remember, you know, being in the car, towing the trailer. I think you used to tow the trailer with the race car on it. Mum used to tow the caravan, and off we'd go for our weekend adventures.
It must have been like an adventure every day for you then, I suppose.
We were, you know, sort of camping at a race circuit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So there's three children.
Yes.
Are you?
I'm the eldest.
You're the eldest.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you saw it and lived it the longest,
Yes,
if you like, out
I
of all
did.
of your siblings. But what was it like for you then, growing up with all of this going on? Because obviously you have school and other things going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I remember being at race circuits, and I remember I was fascinated with the fold-up caravan because that was quite magical, that it would fold up and fold down and you wound it. And I mean, I remember one of us lost our tooth in there and we had to find, you know, tooth fell out, had to find that. So yeah, I always had fond memories and memories of trying to take photos of Dad racing as he was flying, you know, the cars were all flying past on a little click camera. Yeah. Trying to learn and then waiting to get the photos developed afterwards. And I was probably only 6 or 7. Yeah. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the race meetings. It was also going to the dealership, to the Saab dealership. And, you know, sort of walking around. I remember going there and going to sort of automotive places that were related to racing where you were either working or involved through the racing. And I distinctly remember, you know, sort of going to these really cool places that we could just wander around and look at this.
Did you ever drive anything like go-karts or anything when you were younger, or?
No, we had a pedal car. Not quite the same.
Close enough.
We had a pedal car which I had modified with stripes and both Claire and Charlie's names on the side, like a race car.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we were at one meeting.
It had the same number as well, actually, didn't it?
Yes,
34.
it did.
Yeah. It's like Lewis Hamilton's 44. This is number 34.
It's been around with me for a very long time.
Is it?
And we had, the dealership had a little Saab with a lawnmower engine, and both Claire and Charlie then took off across the paddock in it.
The gold one, wasn't it?
I can't remember,
Little gold open Saab, like an early electric, like you'd have an electric kids car. It was
wonderful. It's incredible.
But no, we didn't have a go-kart. Lots of people do start racing with go-karts.
Of course, yeah.
We have, for birthdays,
been
to a kart track.
And I bet the family competitiveness really comes out, does it?
Maybe.
Couldn't possibly comment.
It was always the argument that Dad was heavier, so, you know.
I have the same with
because
my
I was
son
a child.
as well.
Yeah.
So Claire, at what point did you think, I want to go racing?
It wasn't really until my late teens, early 20s.
18th birthday present was an experience at Thruxton.
Right.
Claire was the only girl and various chaps there, and I went along and sat at the back just to observe. At the end of the day, not only was Claire the best, but the instructor wrote a wonderful note which said, the best I've seen in 3 months.
Wow.
I had stopped racing long ago, so that became a fairly strong catalyst for Claire wishing to go racing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I was also intrigued by the thought, sort of the, not a career, but the work as a motorsport instructor, because that was really, it seemed like a really cool way to earn a living, quite frankly. I mean,
because you did that, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
But to
Tell us a
do
little bit about that.
you have to have race experience.
Yeah.
And I got on really well with my instructor on the race experience at Thruxton. I think it was my 19th birthday because I went to Silverstone for my 18th and did a road skills course, which was great, which then led to my following birthday, then, doing the race experience. And just absolutely loved it. It was, again, I went to these race circuits and I recognised them from being there as a kid. Because I had my own money, didn't have a huge amount of money, but had to budget to find a car, get my ARDS license initially, just to even make sure I could get my race license. So I did that at Castle Combe and passed. That was all fine. And then went back to Castle Combe, and when they had a race meeting there, they had their own saloon championship, but they also had the BRSCC road saloons racing there on the same weekend. And this was under some advice from an instructor that I'd met doing a Clio Cup scholarship. So back in, I think, 2002, every year there was a team, I think it was Tim Sugden, did a Clio Cup scholarship, and you could pay and enter this scholarship competition. Right. And so I did that on a bit of a whim to see where I got to. Obviously not coming through karting. I had no idea how I'd fare, but I thought, well, give it a go, why not? And obviously I was up against, there was only, I think, myself and maybe one or two other girls doing it, with about 30 or 40 boys, men, all sorts, real mix of people. So it's incredibly competitive, but I got through to the third round, and through that had spent time, in between being tested on things, and being in between being in the car, sitting with some of the instructors and just got chatting. And Paul Brown was very kind, very helpful, and said, if you don't have experience, stick with something that you're used to. You drive a front-wheel drive car on the road, saloon car, just go with that. Find a front-wheel drive saloon car, saloon championship, and just start there. And so that's what I did. At Castle Combe, went and spoke to some people that were racing that day, asked if anyone knew of a car that was for sale, found a car that was for sale, didn't really know what I was looking at. I'm not particularly mechanical. So again, lent on a couple of friends that were mechanical to help. And we ended up taking my little car to Mallory, didn't we?
What car was that?
It was a Mark I Golf.
Okay. Yeah.
Little black Mark I Golf with red and orange and yellow squares all over it. And so I took it to Mallory for a test day. Never been there. There were some Citroen Saxo hot hatches testing as well. So went out in, a suit that someone had given me for free because it was just a random size that hadn't sold. And off I went, did a few laps, came back in. My friend checked the car, I wasn't completely freaked out, went back out again and just tried to tag on to the back of these Citroen Saxos.
Yeah.
And in the end, a few laps later, overtook one of them around the long right-hand corner.
Oh, right. Wow.
First turn. So got into a bit of a groove and So then entered
and
my
that
first
adrenaline
race.
rush
Yeah,
came in.
yeah.
That was it.
Didn't freak out, loved it, wanted to have a go at a proper race. I think I did 3 races at the end of the BRSCC Road Saloons Championship. So it would have been September, October time.
Yeah.
I met ATMR, who were running cars for the VW Cup, and they took me under their wing. ATMR put it all together for me and ran me for 2 years in the VW Cup. And so, yeah, so I went from sort of not doing much, literally 7 races under my belt, into the VW Cup, which is incredibly competitive. Not one make saloon, but it was a mix of models.
Yeah.
From Mark 1s to Mark 5s eventually, of the Golf, a couple of caddy
but I take it they were all of a similar specification,
They were tested, they were power tested at the beginning of the season.
Okay.
So there weren't classes through the grid. It was one grid, and you carried a minimum weight depending on your power output. Right. And so that's how they tried to level the playing field. Yeah. But you still then had turbo diesels, V6 petrols,
a whole mixture of stuff.
And then me with my little 1.8 GTI, little Mark 1, that was light and great on the corners, great under brakes, but not, didn't have the power out of the corners. So I really just had to keep the speed up.
So I take it from there onwards then, life probably happened at some point.
Yes.
Did you, and I think Charles was telling me earlier that you did have a bit of a break from motor racing for a few years.
I did. So, I ran, again, sponsorship, ran out of money at the end of the 2005 season. I would have loved to have carried on. Perhaps got a more competitive car and pushed myself further up the grid. Because I wanted to, I was aiming for British Touring Car Championship. That was where I would have loved to have gone. That was sort of the goal.
Yeah. But were there many women doing what you were doing at that point?
Not really. I remember being at Donington once, and there were 4 girls. Susie Stoddart, now Susie Wolf, she was there racing, I think would it have been F3 or F4 or something possibly? Okay. And 2 other girls. Never saw them again. I think we were sort of gathered together to take a photograph because it was quite a big thing that there were 4 girls at a race meeting together. We were all racing in different grids. I was always the only girl or female driver in the VW Cup, except for one guest driver that entered one race.
So it must have been quite difficult then, I suppose. I mean, did it, because you hear about barriers, for women trying to get into motorsport. Yeah. Did you experience any of that?
Well, I mean, I suppose the financial side of it is a massive barrier. And coming from a small, it's sort of the knock-on of everything, isn't it? Haven't got a huge budget, so you have a car that isn't as competitive, so you don't then get the results. I was still running.
It doesn't matter how talented you are if your car's not fast enough.
I was still running mid-grid competitively. Yeah, it's always been a barrier, and I wasn't very good. I was quite shy. I wasn't very good at putting myself out there and saying, you should sponsor me because X, Y, Z. I'm now looking for sponsorship again to race with the coupe in the Cooper with Alan. And so, but I'm, older and wiser and a little bit more in a better place to be, feeling that I'm a better proposition, I suppose, for a sponsor.
Because at the moment, I mean, obviously you're both driving this car now, and that's the irony of it all, isn't it? Where you started as a small child, watching Dad going around a racetrack, to actually now be driving with him in this car.
It's great.
It's quite inspiring.
Well, to go complete circle, Claire was responsible in a funny way for me returning to racing after a 20-year gap. I'd stopped completely. I had not been to a circuit.
No.
And Claire was helping to run a race meeting at Mallory Park 1 October, phoned me and persuaded me to come up and spectate on the Sunday, which I did. Bumped into people I'd raced against 20 years earlier. It was very sociable, and I was persuaded that maybe now was the time to return to racing.
Yeah.
And ended up deciding on classic saloons, and ended up buying a car from this very race shop that we're in, Laranca Engineering. Had a BMW 1800 Ti, having been driven and to victories by the owner here, Richard Shaw, and Jackie Oliver, who was a Formula One driver and a Le Mans winner. And so very competitive.
Yeah.
I bought that in 2008. Normally the races were 1 hour long, and when Claire was able to, she then came along and shared the drive with me.
Yeah. How's it been then racing with Dad? You know, because up until this point you hadn't actually raced together with Dad.
No, and
now
always
all
raced.
of a sudden
we both always raced, I think.
Yeah.
Just in sprint races when you're the only driver, you know, sort of 15 minutes or a number of laps. Quite a short, sharp race, but the endurance, sort of the mini endurance races was much more fun, and you could do them as a single driver,
right?
But you could also do them as a two-driver team, which added quite a fun element, really.
Yeah.
Most of them were 1 hour long. We did do one race in Germany on the Nordschleife of the long circuit of Nürburgring, a 2 hour race.
Yeah.
We did an hour each and ended up on the podium.
Yeah.
That was a challenge because there are 60 or 70 corners to learn. We had booked for a training course. We arrived there to find it had been cancelled. And I had no option but to use my wife's car.
No option. I don't think he booked the course.
I think she was probably hoping if something happened to it, then she'd get a new car sooner than otherwise. We persuaded Richard from here to be our teacher. So 4 of us, all wearing helmets, out with the public, because you pay whatever it was, 25 euros to do a lap. And we surprised a few people in this totally normal road car.
Yeah.
And we literally learned in 2 hours, we did 9 laps, as it indicates how long it is. And that was learning 70 corners.
That's some going,
so
isn't
we
it?
only really got a couple of laps each. Was that the Thursday evening before we then raced on it the next day?
Yep, we then had qualifying the next morning and then the race. And there were 2 races starting at the same time. One was a 2 hour race and one was a 4 hour race, starting simultaneously. There were over 100 cars and you hadn't a clue who you were racing against.
It was such a completely different experience.
But it was fantastic and we were very fortunate. I think it's fair to say we're reasonably quick.
Well, evidently.
But very consistent and steady. And came second in class at the end of it all, much to our amazement.
It was the end of the 2012 season, so October time, wasn't it, I think? Last race of the season at Donington in the 1800. And then said, right, that's it, I'm not coming back next year because I'm pregnant. So I was 3 months pregnant. I was just, could feel as I was doing the seatbelt up thinking,
I need to stop now.
Getting a little bit snug. So then that was me. I was out for 9 years, I think.
I then stopped 2013. Missed it, and 2016 came up here. Saw Richard, we talked, decided not to do the same again, but to go for the next generation of BMW, which is this 2002, which was sitting in the back of a warehouse.
I take it was already pretty much a race car, was it, at that point?
It was a race car, but not as well prepared as we wanted it. And it didn't have the right bits on it. It had the wrong gearbox, things like that. And it needed to be period.
Sure.
So the team here stripped it right down, built it back up again, and we went out at Thruxton in August of 2016.
Right.
For a test day, the day before a race meeting. And just kept going quicker and quicker as we got used to the car. And then qualified the next day and raced, and I ended up 40-minute race I did on my own. And managed to win the class. So that got me definitely hooked back in again.
Into it again, Sort of reeled you in. I mean, just for the viewers, really, we're sitting in Laranca Engineers' workshop here, and you might be able to hear quite a lot of background noise. But I have a 3-litre CSL over this side, There's a Batmobile on a ramp just there. There's another 2000, there's an with an Alpina badge, but it's 2002 TI there. And so
Another
on. There's
Batmobile.
lots and lots of lovely cars around here.
Yeah. So I stopped 2019, had the only time I've ever had a major engine failure when testing, and had a fairly spectacular blow up.
Pistons out, was it? Or not quite that bad?
Hole in both
big,
side of the engine.
A big hole, fist size on both sides.
Yeah.
All the oil out.
I think it's still here as a memento.
Yeah,
onto the back tires, set me into spin at about 110 and caught fire. And before I stopped, I'd already activated the fire extinguisher. It took the team here 4 months to source the bits and build it up again.
But I take it would have been a standard engine at that point, was it? Or was it?
Standard block, but you're allowed to do quite a lot of things inside. So from a standard road car, it would have had 120 brake horsepower in period. We have over 200 brake horsepower now.
Okay.
So you're allowed, certain things are free. The carburetors we'll look at are much bigger than a road car. Cam shaft will be different. The pistons will be, but the bore and stroke and the sizes have to be
the same
as original.
Right. Okay. We can do more with airflow and high lift cams and all that kind of stuff.
We're not. It's not a car that you would be pottering down to the shops and back in.
No.
Has it ever been road registered, or has it always just been?
It does have a registration number.
Okay, right.
I then had a 2-year gap because of COVID, and I had some major surgery. I then had to wait 6 months before I had to go on the treadmill to prove to a cardiologist and Motorsport UK that I was fit
to have a racing license again.
Get my racing license. So I booked the treadmill for 2 days after the 6 months period. I wasn't, and I passed, and I wasn't certain if I'd have the stamina to do 40-minute race.
Right.
I was going every day to the gym and had been since 8 weeks after surgery. But that's where I then asked Claire if she would like to come back after 9 or 10 years away.
Yeah.
And it took her a long time, like 5 seconds.
Even that. I might have even said, why are you only asking me now?
Why are you asking me this question? You know what the answer is.
To say yes. Well, and so 2022, we were back at it again, and we ended up. This car has been incredibly reliable. Bearing in mind, we're looking at a 50-year-old car.
Yeah.
More than that now.
Yeah, more than that. The team prepare it superbly, and
the preparation is all done here.
All done here.
It's all done here by Laranca Engineering.
They build the engines themselves.
I am not mechanical. Many people in racing love the engineering side of it and are good at it. I'm neither. So I'd rather have professionals doing it. And so we ended up winning not only our class of the championship, not a championship, sorry, a series, but also the overall series.
Join us in part 2, where we celebrate some of Claire's very recent success. Find out what's involved if you would like to get into racing, and take a closer look at Charles and Claire's BMW 2002 Ti race car. Remember, if you have a car story that you would like to feature, then please contact me. Details are in the description of this video.